Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, my beloved Boston Celtics are in the NBA Finals, set to face off against the Golden State Warriors. The series starts on Thursday, but to get there in Game 7 on Sunday, it was like pulling teeth. I think I texted you that it took about 5 or 6 approximately years away from my life. And it was essentially towards the end of the game, Sap, either going to be what was one of the biggest collapse, if not the biggest collapse in Game 7 history in the NBA, or the Celtics getting to the NBA Finals. So there was either going to be devastation or elation. Fortunately for me and my mental health and the rest of the Green Teamers and Celtics Nation, it was elation. And now they're headed to their first NBA Finals in 12 years, and they're facing a team that they've played historically over the past 6-7 years pretty well. On paper, it looks like a fun matchup. But Sap, before we do our preview of the finals, let's talk about this Game 7 and how it was sort of a microcosm of the Celtics season, right? Things that they did right, they did really right. Things they did wrong almost cost them the game.
Yeah, all rolled into 48 minutes, right? I mean, they played really well early, kind of let Miami back in the game, then lengthened it out, and then let them back in, and finally had a 13-point lead with 3:35 remaining in the game. So you're like, okay, get the champagne ready. The Celtics are going to the finals. And then if Jimmy Butler nails that three, it would have put Miami up by 1 with less than 20 seconds left. Fortunately for the Celtics, he missed that. It was maddening. It almost felt like you saw the movie Flight with Denzel Washington when he lands the plane upside down.
Yes.
It felt like that. You got to safety somehow, but then after that, you needed like a lot of Klonopin to calm you down. That was kind of what happened to the Celtics on Sunday night, but they did it. They found a way to win. It wasn't pretty. They never make it easy on themselves, but now they can prepare for the NBA Finals against Golden State.
Yeah, so, let's start off with that Jimmy Butler shot, Sap, because that's still, even days later, what a lot of people are talking about. Now, Butler obviously was fantastic in Game 6, and I think equally fantastic in Game 7 up until the point that he missed that shot. He had played every second of that game, and I think that is the first time in the game that showed that maybe if he had just a little bit of extra legs, that shot goes in. I mean, you can't say that definitively, but he finished the game with 35 points, 9 rebounds, and was, again, for what looked like the second straight game, the best player on the court. I have zero problem, Sap, with him taking that shot. Now, again, I'm a Celtics fan, so maybe from a Heat fan, I feel a little bit differently, but trying to take a bird's eye view of it, he was hot. The team had stunned the Celtics. I think you go for the win in the kill shot there.
Yeah, I have no problem with that shot. Absolutely. I mean, he's not a great three-point shooter, but he's a clutch player. He's the only reason you're really in that game at that moment. So you ride with him. If he hits it, you're up 1, and I doubt the Celtics would be able to recover from that. Now, he misses, you start fouling, and fortunately Marcus Smart hit 2 foul shots to put him up by 4. And he kind of owed his teammates that because he had missed 5 consecutive shots in the final 3:35. And that didn't help matters because, they weren't able to close that large deficit. It would never come down to that if the Celtics just executed better down the stretch. But really no issue with that for Jimmy Butler. He's not a great three-point shooter, but he got a clean look. Momentum was on the Heat side. It was a situation where obviously if he drains that, the place goes nuts. And that would, kind of rival Ray Allen's 3 back in the 2013 finals, although that was in the finals and that was to force overtime in Game 6, which the Heat went on and won Game 7 in the title. But I don't have a problem with that at all. That's the new metrics in the NBA. The 3 is better than the 2, although I think he probably could have got to the basket. And I think you look back 3 years ago when Butler was with Philadelphia, if you remember, they played Toronto in the second round in the Eastern Conference, and Toronto was up 2 with about 8 seconds left, and Butler had an opportunity maybe to pull up and take a 3 to put them up 1, put his Philadelphia 76ers up 1. Instead, he took it right to the basket, laid it in. Now you have a tie game. And, of course, we remember Kawhi hit the shot to win the game and the series that, rattled down the rim like a half a dozen times before falling in. So maybe Butler in the back of his mind said, this time I'm going to take the 3 to put us up 1. I'm not going to put it in the hands of someone else to beat us for a final shot. Maybe that was in the back of his mind. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I'm not in Jimmy Butler's mind.
Right. And I don't remember the exact circumstance as to why that game was tied at that point. If there was a comeback or if it was close the entire, game, I'd have to go back and look. But I feel like with the momentum that was going for Miami at the end of that game, and that they had went on an 11-0 run to that point and really had just like stunned the Celtics, and the arena was going ballistic. I think that you have to ride that sort of momentum, and take that shot. And whether Sap that was in his mind or not, he is the type of player that is going to be confident in anything he does, and he shot that with confidence. It happened to rim out. But if I'm Eric Spoelstra or any of his teammates, I believe in Jimmy Butler and I want him taking that shot. That's sort of the mentality of that organization is, you go for the win. And so I think that that's the right shot. And if I'm a Heat fan, I'm obviously disappointed, but I don't feel like the decision to not drive to the basket is keeping me up at night. I think that, he made probably the best decision for, that represents what Jimmy Butler is as a player, which is always going for, trying to win. And I texted you after the game, Sap, that I was positive that shot was going in. I think all of Celtics Nation felt like that shot was going in. It felt like an eternity that the ball was up in the air. And, a huge sigh of relief that it didn't, obviously. But, back to what you said a second ago about Marcus Smart knocking down those free throws. Yeah, great that he knocked down clutch free throws, but you also said this. He took the Celtics' last 5 shots up to that point, Sap, and that is, we saw the good and the bad Marcus Smart in this game, and that is the bad Marcus Smart. There's no way, shape, or form that he should be the guy in a tight game trying to take those shots, and that Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown shouldn't be that person.
No, I mean, the Miami Heat baited him into taking those shots. That's why Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA. They took the ball out of Jason Tatum's hands. For some reason, Jaylen Brown didn't make himself available. In both Game 6 and Game 7, Brown and Tatum didn't really look to try to close those games and was left up to other players to try to do it. Smart's, willing and ready. He's not always able, but
Right.
he'll put the shots up. I mean, there's no question about that. I wish I had as much confidence living my life as Marcus Smart does playing basketball. I heard someone say that, he's got Mick Jagger confidence with American Idol participant talent. Like, he's a good role player,
I like that.
defensive player of the year. We got all that, but he's not an elite player. And sometimes Draymond Green gives you that too with Golden State, but I will guarantee you at the end of a game that Draymond Green's going to be looking for Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or someone else. He's not going to just take over and say, "Get out of my way, boys. I've got this," because that's Marcus Smart's DNA. So the Celtics have to figure out a way to get the ball maybe into Jaylen Brown's hands or try to get something better going offensively. Miami took them out of that set, forced Tatum to make the right basketball play to get it to a teammate. Just so happened that Marcus Smart was the guy, and he decided to take 4 threes in the final 3.5 minutes. Maybe drive to the basket, try to draw a foul, do those types of things. Maybe milk the shot clock a little more, but that's always dangerous. You get a wide open 3 with 11 seconds left on the shot clock. It's not necessarily a bad possession, but you do have to make the shot.
Yeah. So it's frustrating, as a Celtics fan, because he does a lot of things that you love, and he did have 24 points, and the Celtics needed all of them. 9 assists to only 1 turnover in that game, Sap. So a fantastic assist to turnover ratio. Sorry, 5 assists to 1 turnover. He had 9 rebounds. But he did all of this good stuff, and then if the Celtics had lost that game, all you would remember is, why did Marcus Smart take our last 5 shots? He clanked all of them. So good and bad Marcus Smart. The Celtics, we've talked about all year long, Sap, do have trouble closing games. They didn't really close this one. The Heat just sort of ran out of gas or ran out of time. But it doesn't matter because they're going to the NBA Finals. But before we look into that, Sap, just a couple more things to clean up in this Game 7, because it was a really exciting Game 7. Something that's being talked about right after the game and a little bit still today is that the NBA negated a 3 that Max Strus hit in the third quarter, a couple minutes after the fact, saying that he stepped out of bounds. Now, the way I've read it is that you actually don't have the power to go and initiate replay to see if somebody steps out of bounds or not. but you do have the power to see if somebody steps on, if it's a 2 or a 3. And within the context of that, you can then go ahead and look and see if they stepped out of bounds. So that's how it came to be. Obviously, Heat fans looking through Heat-colored glasses are saying he did not step out of bounds. Celtics fans are saying, oh, he definitely stepped out of bounds. Sap, where do you lie on that?
To me, it looked like his heel was above out of bounds, but not necessarily touching out of bounds. So now it becomes, how do we define that? Maybe they had a better angle to see that he, in fact, stepped out of bounds. Look, replaying the NBA is a total mess. They've got to figure this thing out for next year. The NFL will make changes in midstream, right during the playoffs. We remember back when the Patriots and Eagles met in the Super Bowl, it's like they decided to change what a catch was and a catch wasn't. And I think the NBA next year is going to have to sit down and say, we've got to clean this up because it's taking away all of the feel of the game. It stops any kind of momentum you have in watching it. And again, you could probably replay so many things. Was this person's toe here? Was it a charge? Was it a block? Which is always a difficult call. Anyway, in that situation, it was kind of weird that, nearly 5 minutes later in real time, they're like, oh, he took 3 points off because Max Strus stepped out of bounds. But the look was whether he was a 2 or a 3. That's always a dangerous situation, a slippery slope. I don't think he looked like he stepped out of bounds. It looked like his heel was above out of bounds, but obviously they must have had a better look at it because that 3 points came back to haunt Miami. Now, the rest of the game may not have played out, so you can't say, well,
right,
that was the biggest difference in the game and Butler wouldn't have.
Well,
it is crippling the sport.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second, but I heard the last part where you're saying it's crippling the sport, and I agree that it's something the NBA definitely has to address. We've talked about this a lot, right? That my suggestion is for replay, and this wasn't the same with the 3-pointer here, but in general, you have 30, 45 seconds. If you can't figure it out, call on the floor stands. Period.
Right. Yeah.
But as far as the 3 goes, Sap, can you also, again, this is me as a Celtics fan, can you say, okay, well, late in the game, the officials missed a blatant offensive foul on Jimmy Butler where, he shoved off, I think it was on Marcus Smart. Like it all comes down to, is the officiating in the NBA good? No, it's not. Is it ever going to be really good? Probably not. So I feel like, listen, Heat fans certainly can say, oh, that 3 that changed the whole course of the game. But then if you're a Celtics fan, you can look at this, that, and the other thing and say, well, we got a bum rap on that. So it seems to even out.
You go back and forth with this as much as you want. I mean, it's like a long rally at the French Open. But when you look at it in this series, I think the officials got involved too much. In game 6, Jet, there were 55 fouls called in a 48-minute game, which is essentially a foul every 50 seconds. There were 19 foul calls in the fourth quarter of game 6 alone, where that's one every 38 seconds. There was no flow to that game. It was ugly. But the Celtics did go to the free throw line 201 times in this series. Miami went 147 times. So the Celtics did go to the line an average 8 more times per game than the Heat. So, the officiating is just poor, and it impacts the game as more so than it really impacts either team. It's just the flow of the game gets choppy and ugly, and I'm sure it's going to still happen in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, you and I were texting about this, Sep. Like, how many officials do the NBA trust? It seems like it's like the same 3 or 4,
same 5 or 6 guys. Yeah,
it's
Tony Brothers, Scott Foster's there, Zach Zerber,
and these guys aren't good. So these are the guys they think are the best. Like that. What's that say about the other ones?
Again, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So you go with what they feel are their best officials. If these are their best officials, I don't want to see the bad ones.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's like, what are the other ones just completely incompetent? Like it's not good. They need to, I don't know what they can do to clean up the officiating. They definitely have ways to clean up the replay. There's at least tangible ways to clean that up. With the officiating, I think at this point, Sap, you've watched basketball for a very long time. I've watched it for like 30 years. I think you just throw up your hands and be like, it is what it is. It's a hard sport to officiate. Right. It's not getting any better. You just have to live with it. Usually it evens out where both teams end up getting screwed by poor officiating. And I feel like that was the case in most of the series where it's like, oh, the officials screwed us, or you're a Celtics fan. Well, the Heat can say that, the same thing. The officials were bad for both teams. They just were. But Sap, the final point for this series was that Jason Tatum ended up winning the inaugural Larry Bird Trophy, which is for the MVP of the conference finals. Steph Curry won its equivalent in the Western Conference Finals, the Magic Johnson Trophy. Was Jason Tatum the correct choice for this prestigious new award, Sap?
Yeah, I mean, it made sense, right, that the first Larry Bird Award goes to a Celtic. Unfortunately for the Lakers, the first Magic Johnson Award didn't go to a Laker because they didn't even make the playoffs. It would have been nice if Magic had been there and won the award. But, yeah, he deserved it in a sense that he was the best player for the Celtics. They won the series. You can make a case for Jimmy Butler. The only pushback on that was Jimmy Butler in games 4 and 5 was a no-show. So
Completely.
if Butler had been solid in those games, maybe they win another game and they win the series. And it's always tough to give a player from a losing team the MVP, although, 7 games came down to the last shot. Look, without Jimmy Butler, that's probably a 4 or 5 game series. I mean, he was
Without
that magnificent in games 1, 2, 6, and 7. He was by far the best player, but in 3, 4, and 5, he was very subpar. Now, injuries were a concern, and then he made his way back in game 6 and 7 was electric. So, yeah, Tatum deserved it because I think the other Celtics that you could have put into that discussion, maybe Jaylen Brown, but both of those guys, Brown and Tatum, had a ton of turnovers in the series, and Brown missed 2 big free throws in game 6, which would have put the Celtics up with a couple minutes left. So, yeah, Tatum won almost by default. Someone's going to win the award. I think he was deserving, though.
Yeah, I mean, his averages for the conference finals, Sap, 25 points a game, 8 rebounds, 5.5 assists. Those are pretty solid numbers. I mean, they're, nothing that's like, holy crap, like Giannis was in the last series, but really good. I thought he had a good series. He only had one real stinker of a game. That was game 3 where he had 10 points and shot the ball terribly. And so I think that he was consistently the best Celtic in this series, and the Celtics won the series, so you give it to him. So I have no problem with that. And yeah, the Jimmy Butler thing, I agree with you, Sep. He had the 2 best games undoubtedly in this series, in game 6 and game 7. You can't make an argument with that.
And game 1 too. I mean, game 1 he was incredible too, and that got them off to a good start. But then he had 3 stinkers.
Right. Yeah. At the point, you can't just ignore those. And he was a no-show in those games. The game that I was in person for, Sap, game 4, when the Celtics drubbed the Heat from the tip-off, he did nothing in that game. I mean, literally was a non-factor. And it didn't even play the 4th quarter. He was so ineffective. So yeah, Jason Tatum deserved the award by virtue of he was the best Celtic, and the Celtics won the series. I think that's pretty easy. But now, Sap, we go to the NBA Finals, and this is a matchup that I think is a very sexy matchup for the league. Celtics Warriors, 2 big market teams with a lot of fans. I feel like these teams have sort of been circling each other for years. The Warriors obviously have had this dynasty for a while now. Celtics have been knocking on the door, but if you go and look at the numbers, since the Warriors became a really good team, no team has played them better than the Celtics in terms of winning percentage. And so I think the Warriors want to say, okay, well, that's the regular season. This is the championship round. We're a different team. And for the Celtics, I think breaking through that Miami Heat team and getting to the finals is like should loosen them up a little bit. Listen, obviously the NBA Finals is a different thing, but this is a door they've been trying to beat down for a while. And so I feel like this should be a really, really intriguing NBA Finals with 2 teams that are sort of similarly constructed that focus on defense and switching.
Yeah, I mean, they both have really good defenses. The Warriors have the elite offense with a really good defense. The Celtics have the elite defense with a really good offense. And, at times the Celtics offense can look very choppy, especially down the stretch of games. Both teams' core constructed through the draft for the most part, right? You've got Tatum, Brown, and obviously Marcus Smart, and then some other players like, Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, and so forth. And then you've added in some free agents and some nice trades. And obviously the 3 big guys from Golden State, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, all drafted and developed there and have won 3 titles. So you have teams that are kind of built in that fashion. And, I think it's always been kind of felt that they would meet at some point, but there was always LeBron James in the way beating the Celtics to get to the finals. Now this is a little bit different. This isn't the same Golden State team that took care of LeBron in back-to-back years with Kevin Durant. That team was electric, one of the all-time great teams in the history of the sport. This Golden State team is not that. And the Celtics, I think this is their best team since the Garnett, Pierce, Allen teams, because they've got multiple ways to beat you with defense, and you've got their two best young players who are entering their prime, and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and then you've got the requisite veteran and Al Horford. So this is, I think, the best Celtics team since certainly I'd say 2008, 2009. The 2010 team was kind of put together there with some gum and elastics and matchbox and trying to get to the finals and nearly pull it off against the Lakers. This team is better in the sense that it's just better defensively and offensively. Doesn't have the experience of that team, but it's getting there. So this should be an outstanding matchup. The Celtics have the ability to win on the road, Jet. 7-2 in the postseason on the road, better than they played at TD Garden where they're 5-4. And you look at Golden State 9-0 at home. So this is going to be obviously an intriguing matchup.
Yeah, that's daunting. Facing a team that's 9-0 at home, obviously. That's and the Warriors traditionally are a fantastic home team. In fact, Sap, I think, was it a couple of years ago where the Warriors had won a record straight amount of games at home, and it was the Celtics that went into, well, then it was Oracle. Now they've since moved across the bay and beat them. They were the first team to beat them in, however many consecutive games. Celtics are a road warrior team. Excellent road record. Miami was undefeated coming into this series at home, and the Celtics beat them 3 times on their home court. You'd like the Celtics to play better on their own home court, but I don't think the road thing is going to phase them at all. Golden State has a very loud crowd, obviously great fan base, but it doesn't seem to bother the Celtics whatsoever. So I don't look at that so much as a factor. And I don't think they feel that that's a factor. The experience obviously is the thing that stands out the most between the two teams. The Warriors, 6 finals appearance in 8 years. The Celtics, they have 0 combined games of finals experience amongst their roster. Their coach has been to the finals before, but that's the thing to me, Sap, that if you're looking at comparing these two teams, that sticks out like a sore thumb is like, look at how much experience the Warriors have on their roster in this moment, and then the Celtics, who have literally 0.
Yeah, that could play into it, but Kevin McHale years ago when he played for the Celtics, and I think he was going into a series where the narrative was, well, you have more experience than this other team. And he said, well, experience is nice, but give me talent. I'll take talent over experience. Now, if we get down to a situation of Game 6 or Game 7, and it's 3:35 remaining, and the Celtics are up 13, hopefully they don't look to the back of their minds and remember what they did against Miami, nearly blowing a 13-point lead with 3 minutes and 35 seconds left. And Golden State can make you pay because they can score points in bunches with their 3-point ability. And also Golden State's a good defensive team. So you have to find a way to just kind of forget the negative stuff that happened in the prior 3 series. There weren't many negative things against Brooklyn, but they had some hiccups against Milwaukee and Miami. Kind of learn from that and then build from that, and you'll be that much better for it. Golden State's a good road team as well. They in every series always win a road game. Since Kerr took over as coach, the Warriors in every single series they've played, and this is going to be their 24th series with Kerr as their head coach, they've always won at least one road game. So that would lead you to believe that they're going to win one game at TD Garden, which means to win the title, the Celtics are going to have to find a way to win 2 games in Golden State since the Warriors have home court advantage. So, look, both teams can win on the other team's court. And the big thing for the Celtics is because they play defense, that stuff travels. That's not just a cliche. It really means things. And I think sometimes they almost play looser on the road than they do at home. It's like sometimes if you're not shooting well, you're at home, the crowd's oohing and ahhing and it's tense. And next thing you know, that kind of permeates to the players. Sometimes these guys just play better on the road because it's kind of an us versus them mentality.
Yeah, and I don't think the Celtics are intimidated by any team or going to be scared of the moment. Golden State, again, all this experience and stuff like that. But the Celtics don't seem to be fazed by that. What bothers them is their own self-inflicted stuff. So if they can get out of their own heads with that stuff, I think that they, have a really good chance in this series where Golden State is favored, rightfully so. They've this core has won 3 titles. They have all the experience. They have played better consistently throughout the postseason, but they're not massive favorites like they used to be. When they had Kevin Durant. So it should be a relatively even series. And for me as a Celtics fan, Sap, I look at Golden State and go, this is a team that the Celtics can beat. It doesn't, I don't look at it and go, well, it's great that we got to the finals. Like if it was a couple of years ago, like when the Celtics lost game 7 to LeBron and then they faced that same Golden State team, you'd be like, well, it's just great that we got to the finals. We're happy to be here. But you look at this Golden State team, you go, the Celtics can beat this team. It's not unfathomable.
No, because they don't have Kevin Durant. I mean, that's a huge difference, right? And I know he's been gone for 3 years, but this is the 6th time Golden State's made it to the finals. If they lose this one, Steph, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green will be 1-3 in the finals without Kevin Durant. Now we can get into semantics here. 2019, Durant was on the roster, but he played a grand total of 12 minutes and scored 11 points in that series. And that came in game 5, I believe. So, he really wasn't there. He got hurt earlier in the playoffs, tried. If Golden State loses in 2 weeks to the Celtics, Steph and those guys will be 1-3 without Kevin Durant in the finals. And the one win came against the LeBron team where Matthew Dellavedova was his best teammate because Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love
were good player.
Hey, great player. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably a little better than Peyton Pritchard.
One of the best players to ever come out of Australia, Sap. So,
I don't even know about that because Kyrie Irving,
a whole country.
Ben Simmons, and
one of the. I didn't say Australia. One of the best.
Yes, one of the 12 or 15 best players from Australia. So the point then is we're going to talk about legacies. Is if Golden State doesn't win this, it's like, well, Kyrie's got 3 titles, 2 where Kevin Durant was the MVP of those series and the best player on that team. I think we're in agreement that in terms of talent and ability that KD is better than Steph because he's just bigger. I mean,
I think so, but there's some people who like our former producer Christian Burgoyne, who that's like saying insulting his mother. Like, that's
no, because that's what you're going to get in this series. Look, if Steph wins this thing, he'll have 4. And I know people are saying best player of his generation. Well, he must be in a different generation than LeBron. You can make that case about Durant because they were teammates together and won 2 titles, and then Curry won 2 without him. So that does mean something. But it can't just be all about titles because look, it's easy for me to say since I'm a LeBron guy and he's 2 titles behind Michael Jordan, and that's the thing that people argue why he's not the greatest player that Jordan is. Is Yogi Berra the greatest baseball player ever because he won more titles than anyone? No. He's a great player. He's an all-time great, but he's not Mickey Mantle or Joe DiMaggio or Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig, all Yankees that didn't win as many titles as Yogi Berra. So, sometimes you have to push back a little bit on this. And obviously a lot of legacies at stake. And I also think there's 2 guys' legacies at stake in this series, Jet, and they're not even playing. And I'm writing a column for Full Press Coverage, which says Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have a lot at stake here in this final series. Because if Golden State wins, now that diminishes the legacy of Kevin Durant a little bit because they would have won 2 without him. And if the Celtics win, that diminishes Kyrie Irving's legacy because he was supposed to be the leader and best player on the next Celtics championship team. And since he left, they got better, the Celtics. Yep. They went to the conference finals and lost to Miami 2 years ago, got bounced in the first round by Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and James Harden last year. But then they came back and beat Kyrie and Kevin Durant this year, and they're in the finals. And if they beat Golden State, well, who the hell needs Kyrie Irving? So those 2 guys' legacies are at stake. So hopefully Durant and Kyrie Irving aren't watching these games together because they're going to be pulling for complete opposite sides. I'm sure Durant would rather see the Celtics win. I'm sure Kyrie would rather see Golden State win.
I agree with you. I think that's totally the case. Neither one of would ever admit that, but it's definitely an interesting subplot to this series, Sap, where both those guys have something. Who happen to be teammates have something, major at stake in terms of how people view them. More so Durant, but definitely there's the Kyrie factor in it too. And for the players actually playing in the series, especially for the guys on Golden State, Sap, does that provide extra motivation for guys like Steph and Klay and Draymond, where they're like, this one without Durant, if we're able to pull this off, should really mean a lot in terms of how people view us and view this sort of dynasty.
Sure. And look, let's compare Curry to the greatest football player ever in Tom Brady. And, the legacy was at stake when he faced Seattle, right, in Super Bowl 49, because he won 3 early in his career, then lost 2 Super Bowls to Eli Manning, and here he is again. And if they lose that game, now he's 3-3 in Super Bowls and hadn't won one for 10 years. And, was it more the defense at the early part of the dynasty? But then Brady wins Super Bowl 49 and Super Bowl 51 in comeback fashion. That cemented his legacy. He was always an all-time great after winning those first 3 Super Bowls, but that just put him above everyone. I don't think Curry can ever reach that, quite frankly, because there's just guys in that top 10 that I think are going to be nearly impossible for him to jump, simply because they were better players. I mean, they were bigger, they were better defensive players. I know we're going to.
Seth, we said this about the guys he played with too. That caps him. We said this the other day.
Of course. I mean, 2 of the championship teams, he wasn't the best player on the team. Kevin Durant was.
Yep.
So, that's a big part of it. And also, I just want to push back one other thing. I'm not in this hateful mood about Steph Curry. I know a lot of people put him up there because he, quote unquote, changed the game. Well, I mean, Russell changed the game at some point too. And Will Chamberlain changed the game because they started, making the lane bigger because he was so freaking dominant. Did Steph Curry change the game, or did the game kind of come to him? Right? I mean, I know the 3 is more prevalent than it's ever been. Look back just 10 years ago, the average team took 23 pointers per game. Now it's up to 35. It's nearly doubled in the last 10 years. But Curry was kind of in the league at that point already for 3 or 4 years. So did the league just come to him and he just happened to be the best shooter ever, which is a nice, tag to have. But he didn't necessarily change the game as much as maybe Chamberlain. I mean, maybe I'm just pushing back and getting tired of hearing about all of this.
I think it's a combination, Sap, of him and analytics becoming much more prevalent in the NBA. And yeah, so there's certainly a degree of him being at the right place at the right time. I think, regardless of what era he played in, because of his ridiculous range and handles, that, he would have been an all-time great player. But certainly because of analytics becoming much more popular in the NBA over the past decade, that has had a major influence on how successful Steph Curry has been. And that's sort of a chicken or an egg situation, right? Like, did the analytics sort of drift to the 3 because they were watching Steph Curry and go, okay, wow, this is a really much more valuable shot? Or was it analytics risen and instead the Warriors said, well, we have this guy who can shoot 3s. We know they're valuable because of analytics, shoot more 3s. Impossible to really put a definitive answer on it. But yeah, I mean, I see your point. But again, I think that it's a total chicken or an egg situation where you can't really say that. But, teams have more so than I think teams aren't really looking for the next Steph Curry, because I don't know that it's something you can really replicate, even though it looks like you can, because he's not. You've talked about this a lot, Sap. Like, he looks like a guy you'd see at the park or the Y. Be like, oh, he's not particularly tall. He's not particularly jacked or anything like that. But he has obviously this just crazy, unique, spectacular skill set. More so, I think teams are looking for, those 3-and-D guys, and for bigs who can stretch the floor. They're looking for guys more along the lines of, what Al Horford can do now, not what he did, in his earlier part of his career, but guys who are 6'10", who can shoot 3s. That seems to be what everybody wants now.
Right.
Jason Tatum actually happens to be that too. I know I listed him at 6'8". Did you see him at the end of the game with Bam Adebayo? He's as tall as Bam Adebayo.
He's 6'9". He's a good solid 6'9". And the other guy that surprises me how big he is Jimmy Butler, who was pretty much eye to eye with Jason Tatum. Butler, I know, is 6'8", and Butler's strong. I mean, Butler's, a pretty impressive specimen, along with being a fantastic basketball player. But yeah, no, I mean, that's what you're looking for, the 6'9", 6'10" guy. Look, I mean, Kevin Durant, there's no guys like Kevin Durant around. Poor man's version might be Brandon Ingram. Jason Tatum has some of Kevin Durant in him. He just doesn't quite have the range that Kevin Durant has. And he's not as big as Kevin Durant, who's 7 feet tall, which is damn scary. But yeah, you're looking for a lot of those 3-and-D guys. Look, and I'm not trying to besmirch Curry. He's phenomenal. I have him as like my 15th or 16th greatest player ever. I just push back when people say, well, he's going to be top 10 and he's, going to be right on the Mount Rushmore with LeBron and Michael Jordan. I'm like, no, he's not. Yeah. I mean, because those guys that are in the top 10 are just better. I mean, okay, Kobe Bryant or Steph Curry?
Kobe.
Right, because Kobe was bigger, was also
played a lot better defense, way better
played
defense.
A lot better defense. And, he led two, I thought, flawed teams to titles.
Yeah,
right,
we
in
talked about that the
09
other day.
and
Mediocre
2010. Yeah,
teams.
those weren't great teams. I mean, Gasol's a nice player. Is Gasol Kevin Durant? No. Now we can go there. Bird or Curry, Magic or Curry? No. I mean, those guys were bigger. They were actually better defensive players. Bird, who was, slightly inferior shooter to Curry, although not by that much, was a far superior rebounder and passer to Steph Curry. Magic obviously was better. We're going to put Curry with Kareem or Will Chamberlain or Bill Russell? Hell no. And forget Jordan and LeBron. Those guys are in another class to me because they just did everything. I mean, so and he's, again, great player, but, is he better than those guys? No, I don't see him ever getting to that. Derek Jeter has more, World Series rings than Willie Mays and Henry Aaron and Barry Bonds and Ted Williams and Ty Cobb and pick all the great players combined. Is he better than those guys? No.
Yeah, well, I think it's partly because a lot of people Steph Curry is a likable player. I don't like him particularly because I think he's a front runner and sort of arrogant, but that's just probably because of the same jealousy that people have with the Patriots because the Warriors win all the time. Right. You got to pick somebody you hate. Yeah. That's so, I can be at least honest about it. But for the most part,
cuddly. He's also
a likable
cuddly, right?
dude. So people are going to defend him and try to elevate him higher. Is he a more likable player than LeBron? Yes, he is, Sap. I hate to say it.
But
not
but
for
he's
me,
threatening.
but for the most part,
threatening in the sense that he's 6'3", 190. Look, I don't want to get into this, but he's like this light-skinned dude. I mean, Kendrick Perkins calls him that, the light-skinned brother with the green eyes. He's kind of warm and cuddly. Girls love him, and they try to model their game after him because you can't model your game after LeBron James.
Played his whole career in one place.
One place. He comes from royalty. With his dad was a player. You see his dad and his mom, although I think they've separated, but they're at the games.
Everybody knows his family. Yep, they know the daughter.
The wife has a cooking show. He's got the cute kids. I mean, he's just very warm and cuddly. Does a ton of commercials and all of that stuff. So he's kind of like, I wouldn't say the everyman because there's never been a shooter born.
But he has that aura.
He does have that. Whereas LeBron looks like a superhero. You look at him, or Jordan was 6'6" with the bald head and the earring, and he was.
Well, Zap, to give you a comic book reference, more people gravitate towards Batman than Superman. Batman's a human being. Superman's an alien. So it's just
exactly. Yeah, LeBron is like you. I want to grow up and be LeBron as a player. Well, then you can't because you're not 6'9" and you don't have his ridiculous IQ for the game. Steph, which I think is foolish for people to say, I want to grow up to be Steph Curry because he's the best shooter ever. There was a time when, kids would be getting into athletics and the parents would say, I'm going to push my kid to golf or tennis because that's, he can break through and win there. Like, that's easier. Like, okay, just give the guy a tennis racket and he'll be Roger Federer. It's like the greatest tennis player ever, the greatest tennis players ever are great for a reason, like the greatest basketball players are. Is that you're touched by the man up above. You work.
Right. It's not that they just started young.
Yeah, it's not like just give the kid a tennis racket. I'm sure he'll win.
I worked hard at basketball, Steph. I loved playing basketball. I did dribbling drills. I would shoot on my hoop at my dad's house. I was never going to be a very good basketball player.
Right.
I'm at best 5'4.5". I have small hands. It's just never going to happen, no matter how hard I work.
I mean, I mean, I'm not going to go out and play quarterback for the Packers. They already got one.
Yeah. So Sap, last thing we're going to do, and we're going to, as the series progresses, preview each game, talk way more about the individual matchups. But let's just do this. Let's just put our money where our mouth is and make a prediction for the series, because that's all people want to hear, anyways. Go, by all means.
I'm gonna go Celtics in 6. I really think that their defense is going to be a big difference here. I'm not saying they're playing with house money. I mean, if they lose this series, it could be a lost opportunity. Everyone thinks, well, they'll be back next year. Well, that's not the case. I think Tim Bontemps from ESPN wrote a great piece detailing the 2012 Oklahoma City Thunder, who had 3 future MVPs, 3 future Hall of Famers, right, who were 24 and younger and never got back to the finals. Durant did, obviously, when he went to Golden State. And you go back to, Shaq and Penny in 95 got to the finals with Orlando, and okay, they'll be back next year. And no, they weren't. So, it kind of opened up for the Celtics a little bit with Middleton being hurt in Milwaukee and Miami being a little banged up, and Brooklyn in the first series didn't have its act together. So here you are. You got to seize the moment. I always go back to the biggest unfulfilled promise would be Dan Marino. Second year in the league, goes to the Super Bowl. People just assume he's going to go back and win multiple ones. He never got back there. So you got to take care of that right now. And I just think that their defense is going to be there. And I think the two young players are just going to continue to elevate Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And again, you look at Golden State, I think their path was easier than the Celtics, but also the team that mirrors the Celtics the most that they faced with Memphis, who took them 6 games, lost 2 close games, and did that without their best player for 3 games in John Morant and one of their 2 or 3 other great players in Dylan Brooks, who was out for 2 games, and Desmond Bane, who looked crippled out there. So, I mean, Memphis took Golden State to 6 tough games with a lot of pieces missing. If the Celtics can maintain health, I think they will win this series.
As weird as it seems, Sap, I do think the Celtics are going to play looser in the finals than they did in the Eastern Conference Finals, because again, that was like that was their barrier. They've been trying to beat that down for years. This was Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart's 4th conference finals. This was Jason Tatum's 3rd. They have not been able to break through. And then finally, even though they, dodged by the skin of their teeth, Jimmy Butler 3 that would have probably won the game for Miami, they did break through, and they're in the finals now. So I feel like the whole collective team is like, okay, that monkey is off our back. We can just go and, we can not worry about that anymore. We did that. The weight of expectations of getting to the finals. So I do think they're going to play looser. And I do think that there's something to the fact that this team is far more battle tested this postseason than Golden State is. Having to go through Giannis and Durant and Kyrie and Jimmy Butler versus Miami, who went through, a very injured and depleted Denver team. And then, like you said, John Morant was out in the second round against the Grizzlies for most of that series. And then essentially a one-man team in Dallas. That being said, I'm going to unfortunately pick Golden State in 6.
Mm-hmm.
I have picked the Celtics in every round. I picked them, to get to the finals. I was going to pick the Bucks in the second round, but once Middleton went out, I changed my pick. I think that Golden State, if the experience is huge for me. They're wing defenders, and the Celtics' best players are wing guys. I think that they will be able to frustrate the Celtics. And I also feel like one of the biggest advantages the Celtics would have in this series is Rob Williams, and he's nowhere near 100%. So the fact that the Celtics won't be able to fully utilize him, I think really is going to hurt what the Celtics want to do. And the Warriors are great at taking away bigs, but it's hard to take away a big who can jump and his head is above the backboard, So that was a big advantage for the Celtics. I don't know what they're going to get, if anything, out of Rob Williams. Maybe this rest will heal him completely, and I'll be wrong. But I was looking at that as a big advantage. So I look at the Warriors' defense as being a major factor. And if the Celtics let up, which they've done all season long at the end of games, and think, teams can't come back on them, the Warriors will end up winning these games by 15 points. Yeah, right. The Warriors can score too quickly. So I'm going to say the Warriors in 6. Do I think the Celtics can win this series? Without a doubt. Absolutely, they can. They're capable of doing it. But I'm still going to say Golden State in 6.
Yeah, I mean, again, just looking at it logically, Golden State always wins at least 1 game on the road in any playoff series. So that means the Celtics are going to have to win 2 in San Francisco, and the Warriors are 9-0 this year at home. But again, the Celtics are the best team that Golden State has faced this year. And conversely, Golden State's the best team the Celtics have played because they're healthier. They've got all that experience. And the thing about Golden State, they are deep, right? I mean, they're going to come out with quality players, although that may not be as big a deal because these games are stretched out a bit. And just before we wrap up, would you rest Rob Williams the first 2 games of this series so that you get him back a week from Wednesday? So you give him essentially 10 days off to get ready for game 3 at TD Garden, hoping you somehow steal one in San Francisco, and it's a 5-game series. Now you have home court advantage, and you have in theory, a healthier, rested Rob Williams, almost like put him aside for the first 2 games, let him really try to get closer to 100% health, which he's not going to reach till next season. We understand that, but at least it'll be closer.
I'd consider the first game. I don't know, the first 2 games. If you win the first game and he doesn't play, then yeah, okay. But if you lose the first game, I don't know how you can sit him out in the second. I don't know. Again, we're not privy to the medicals, and so it's virtually impossible to say. I would say that there's a good chance he probably doesn't play in game 1 based off how he looked in game 7, which was he couldn't do anything. Credit to him for giving it a go, but he couldn't do anything on the court. It's not a bad thought, Sap, but it all depends on how game 1 goes. If you lose that game, you can't really afford to just say, we're not going to play him in game 2 either.
Right.
So, we'll have to see that. But again, we're going to talk much more about this series and previewing each game and talking about each game as it goes. Hopefully the Celtics can prove me wrong. They proved me wrong all season long. And Sap, by virtue of if they win the first game, they've not lost back-to-back games in the playoffs, and they haven't really lost back-to-back games since January. They should win the series then, right? If they just win the first game.
If they win the first game, as long as they avoid losing back-to-back, they will win the series. That's
there you go.
Great logic there, Jet. You're
Thank
now
you.
a logician.
I appreciate that. So that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out Sap's article that's coming out this week. Sap, when's it coming out?
Should be out tomorrow or game day. Fullpresscoverage.com, and I'll tweet it out at JohnSap25.
And I will retweet it. So check out Sap's Twitter. Check out mine at Jet Stryer. And just find the podcast wherever podcasts are found. Type in the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. And we will be talking about this series in every way, shape, and form, every detail. So make sure you stick here and listen to the show. And we'll talk to you guys later. See you, everybody.